welcome to Tuesday Night Live. Thanks for being here. Those of you who were here last Tuesday night, thank you for being here. And thanks to Pat for stepping up and covering, and always appreciate what he brings to the table. It's always, I always hear good reports from the first three people. And anyway, I really appreciate always hearing about how good it is when I'm gone. So everybody's doing good? I love that. So just to get us going, how was our trip? Our trip was very good. Very good. The only problems with the trip was the airlines. So we take off Thursday morning, fly to Seattle. We all meet in Seattle. We fly from Seattle to Frankfurt, change planes to head to Amman, Jordan. And they tell us when we get off of our flight in Frankfurt, you're not going till tomorrow. Our bags are shipped to Amman. We don't have any access to our luggage, but we all just looked fabulous, and we actually got better acquainted because we could say, hey, did you meet Bob in the red shirt? Because Bob had the same red shirt on the next day. So you could really start getting acquainted with people, you know. They wore the same clothes, and so anyway, no switcheroo. But anyway, we did well. Lufthansa decided that they didn't want any of their flight crews to be left in Jordan or Israel, so there was no flights to get you out the next morning. So anyway, we were a day late getting in and a day late getting home. So instead of getting home Sunday night, we got home last night, and it was very safe. Everybody on the trip, I asked, how many of you felt safe? Every one of them felt safe. And that's a big thing, because when you've got all the news, you know, and this thing with Iran, they need to either get this over with or forget the whole thing, one or the other. But dragging the feet, you know, more people are dying. I think Trump has put his name and reputation on the line. Help is on the way, but no help has showed up yet. It's all sitting off the coast. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But here we are, Tuesday Night Live, and this is the very last week of January. Where has it gone already? Where has this month gone? It's been one of the most profoundly disruptive months in living memory. The pace at which things are changing right now is so rapid that the vast institutions that everyone assumed would be there forever are washing away in very real time. Did you happen to catch President Trump's speech to the World Economic Forum? I caught it while I was in... I might have been in Jordan. I caught it, whatever evening it was that he spoke. And, you know, it was a very interesting speech if you paid attention to it. And it contributed to some of the things that I wanted to point out tonight. I wanted to move us right into these current events. And as we always ask, you know, are things falling apart or things falling in place? Do you know there's some things that have to happen in order for the entire world to turn against Israel? As much as we hate to see that, this is what the Bible says is going to happen to Israel. Things are happening, but it also talks about other events going on in the world that are going to contribute to some of these things. And I want you to see this. How many of you know City's Church? They were protested against. They broke into their service, and and erupted the whole thing. Did you see this? And so it makes hardly any news. And at the end of the day, the people who did this were paid protesters. They paid them specifically to go to that church and disrupt it. What all the reasons were, I don't know, but I know that the fact that it was a very well-known church, and whatever was going on in there, they were upset about, probably because they didn't support some things and supported other things, and so they wanted to make some noise about that. If you know the end of the story, there were 3 that were arrested, and they were released without any bail, and the media completely ignored pretty much this entire story. Got very little press. And so who knows? I know our jails are full enough that, if you've got people that don't need to be in jail, typically they'll at least set bail and let them out. And in this case here, no bail and no need to spend time in the Gray Bar Motel, So how about this one here? Why are you messing up on me? Let me get rid of this. Maybe that'll work. Hey, German Chancellor, this guy erupted very much about the European Union, and he was wrapped really tight about all the regulations, and he really was confronting them about that, and he is pushing towards entrepreneurial freedom for these countries that make up the European Union, and he's tired of having to follow the rules that have always been. And this is one of the interesting things, because this era of immortal international institutions is rapidly coming to a close. And I want you to see this tonight, because this is some of the pieces that we watched as a part of the speech the other night with our president. The USA has formally, at last, withdrawn from the World Health Organization, and that's a big move. Big move. For some of us, our entire lives, these major institutions have been a mainstay. I mean, they were just a part of what always has been, and we've just accepted them as just the norm, and we didn't make a big deal out about the way that they were, but all of us who've paid attention know that it's been a growing dissatisfaction with many of these organizations that are no longer anything more than money suckers, constantly sucking money. And so this is a big decision. And what we thought was always was kind of untouchable has now been touched. And guess who's leading the way on a bunch of this? None other than Mr. Trump. He held back nothing the other night, and he was actually nicer than what it was promoted to be in his speech. But when we talk about these organizations, what are we talking about? We're talking about NATO, the European Union, the World Economic Forum. Think about these. The United Nations, World Health Organization. But in just 1 year, this Trump 2.0, every single one of these immortal institutions seems to be teetering on the brink of disaster. They are ready to be put in the trash heap of history. And so a couple of these Facebook posts. I believe we'll see NATO disbanded. The European Union will fall apart. In fact, I have them here. The European Union will fall apart. The euro will be defunct. These nations will return to their sovereign currencies. World Economic Forum and WHO being dismantled. If that seems too big, consider the UN being kicked out of the United States and go to Babylon, Iraq. Yeah, isn't this interesting? Look at this one. Yes, the post-World War II era of cooperative global alliances like the United Nations and NATO and the WHO are over, mostly because these organizations gained too much power and became corrupt. They overreached with their play for global power and control, and like all centrally planned top-down control systems, they're being challenged. The European central banker-controlled system is being dismantled by Trump, and time will see what emerges in its wake. This is a very, very interesting piece. And I find that this thing is being dismantled very intentionally by Trump, because he's the only one who doesn't care what the world thinks. And he's tired of seeing money dumped down a rat hole. And so the World Health Organization emerged as this biomedical dictator with this certain political party, of which I won't mention, embracing every random decree that WHO wanted to make into law, and even trying to sign us up for a global treaty to give the World Health Organization direct power over individual Americans during declared health emergencies. So when the pandemic came on, they wanted to have full control over the U.S. They wanted to have full control over the world. And we saw at the World Economic Forum do all that they could do to leverage the pandemic into this technocratic great reset. And that's what they called it, dictating like a dysfunctional king on steroids. And meanwhile, NATO and the European Union, that has been long criticized as totally feckless and wasteful, but largely dismissed by ordinary Americans as it's other people's problems. It's not our problem. We don't pay any attention to it. Just kind of dismiss them, viewing us as having outsized influence on America's elites and our political classes. So how many years have we watched as trillions of U.S. taxpayer dollars are ritualistic burned to please our European comrades? Ostensibly, we're funding this endless war in Ukraine, and that's where much of that money has gone to, that involves zero American interest. Meanwhile, back at home in our own country, it was sagging under this excruciating hardship of the pandemic. And we heard from a bunch of people that now have been proved totally and embarrassingly wrong. Mr. Fauci and a variety of others that wanted to have such a major presentation, and constantly it was always doctor, just like Dr. Jill Biden. Thank God she's a doctor watching over her husband. And so we learned that not only did these international institutions start drooling over the prospect of imposing personal vaccine mandates and travel limitations on us, but they were using our own money to conquer us. It's exactly what was going on. And so the United Nations, NATO, European Union, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization were revealed to many Americans to be sworn enemies, pretending to be looking out for us, who saw the U.S. as an ATM to be used anytime they needed more. So, this is a very interesting piece. All these amazing institutions, all these things that have been what we thought were immovable and would always be there. Well, let me see here. Let me go back. I want to cover one more thing, couple more things here before I jump on this next one. Trump's new Board of Peace. It's one of those things that he's orchestrating this, and there's give and take by nations that he's invited to be a part of it. And this is one of those pieces we've talked about that you really need to be watching to see what's going to unfold, because this whole thing is going to challenge the existence of the United Nations. This is exactly what it's going to do. He is pointing to the United Nations to becoming non-existent. And he is poised to gut the United Nations. And lots of evidence suggests it's already happening. So not just talking about it, he's actually doing this. This new Board of Peace. This is going to be a major player, way more than just the issue of Gaza. And you should be fully aware of this. So his plan is to gut the UN, and that iron fist that's covered with a velvet glove has got some pretty major claws inside of it. And he's going to use that glove very effectively and very creatively. And how is he going to use that? With tariffs. With tariffs. And you heard this in his conversations at the World Economic Forum. And he was very blatant about, well, we'll just raise their tariffs. Well, we'll give them a break on their tariffs. And I'm telling you, he is using this thing like a trump card, you know. Yeah. Wondered if you would with me. I'm the one who's been up all night. I'm just checking to see if you guys are with me. And then, you know, this last week we had Governor DeSantis here in Idaho. What was he doing here? He was here in Idaho, and he was very intentional about being here, as well as a lot of other states. And he wasn't doing to schmooze for someday running for president. He was organizing this constitutional convention that is going after a balanced budget, so that he gets all the states on board, and he's actually making headway. He's getting the job done. And this is a big deal. And while that all is going on, within the first 27 days of January, Iran looks like it's on the verge of collapse. Not fast enough. Not fast enough. Something has to happen. The amount of people who are being destroyed. Yesterday, you know, the Ayatollah came out and said, you know, use whatever you have to use in order to wipe out our people. Think about this. No holds barred. Anything that you think will work, use it. And this makes for a very, very horrible, horrendous thing. If you've been keeping track of what's really going on there, it's heartbreaking. The people of Iran are wanting so much. And you know what? You can raise a big stink out of one or two people who are killed in Minneapolis, but you can't get 100,000 people put to death. You can't get the world pushing back on that. Who do you see making noise over that? And including our own nation, and we're leaning on our president to come through. I don't understand what's holding that back, other than, you know, he's supposedly in negotiations because Iran wants to talk. So let's just talk. Let's just talk while over here we're continuing to kill people. And I read this morning that Israel has been furnishing the president with very strong evidence of all that Iran continues to do in wiping out their populations. So the people of Iran, they need our prayers. They really do. Look at this. Do you think that they know this or they don't know this? Do you think they see this in the paper? Do you see this in the news? Do you think it matters to the LDS? Look at this. Mormon charities funnel how much? To Hamas-linked Islamic NGOs. Investigation reveals. It's going to be very interesting to find out whether or not the Mormons pay any attention to this, whether they admit it, whether they own this, whether they deny this. This is an enormous amount of money. And I think that the Mormons care enough about their reputation. They don't want anything to put a damper on it. You probably remember back when the Olympics were in Salt Lake City, and one of our key leaders, Mr. Romney, he became the salvation of the Winter Olympics. We're going to have it in Salt Lake City. Remember this? It was a big deal, big deal. Well, he did a total makeover for the church. When he was interviewed, you guys are the Mormons. You guys are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. No, we're not any longer. We're the Church of Jesus Christ. The effort is to present themselves as just another sect of Christianity. It's the farthest thing from it. There is only the same terminology, but it is far from true Christianity. And so it makes you wonder what's really going on here, but this should be an attention getter. So if you have Mormon friends, you might ask them, hey, what's up with your church donating a multitude of $1 million to Hamas? We don't do that. Take them to the headlines. Ask Rabbi Google for this, because Rabbi Google has this. But it's a good conversation starter, a real good one. And how about this? Yesterday, they got the last body home. And you know what the headline said? Hamas releases the last held hostage. That is not even true. What's true is that the IDF went in there and found, they had to dig up a number of graves, and they found this soldier, Gavilis. And they identified him because he had 2 pieces of steel in his body from replacement parts. He still had his uniform on, and then dental records. They had to dig him up themselves. Hamas, they continued to drag their feet. They had inside information about where this soldier was buried, and that's why they decided to go in and just get him and bring him home. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. If you saw it, the soldiers went in and got him, brought him out. There was a large gathering of IDF soldiers, and they gathered and they sang Hatikva, and they cried and they prayed, and they got him then to the ones who would get him to his family. And 800 and some days before this came about, and this is a big deal. Some see it as, okay, now we can move forward with phase 2 of the 20-phase plan of Trump. Others see this as, why did it take so long, and why was it so difficult, and why would Hamas refuse to do anything to cooperate? And I'll tell you what the answer is to that question. It's because Hamas is Hamas. That's why. They're terrorists through and through. They can tell you whatever that you want to hear, but they will do nothing more than what they want to do. And so this becomes an enormous piece. And once again, as we talk about this month of January, there's a whole lot of things that have been going on this month that are world level things that have a direct impact on us. And once again, the encouragement to you is to stay awake, be watching, stay informed. I think we live better biblically. I think we live smarter personally when we know what the Bible has to say in light of some of these things that are going on in the world. And by the way, we're submerged among a lot of people who have a lot of curiosity about what is going on in our world and what does it mean and what does the Bible say about it? What does God have to say? What's he going to do about all of this? And I think this is such an important thing. So as we come back from our break, I'm going to talk to you about a piece that has become extremely large, and it's now on steroids. Before we take a break here, let me just cover the announcements. This next Sunday evening, Elliot Chawdoff, and many of you know him, he's going to be with us at 5 o'clock at Deer Flat. 5 o'clock at Deer Flat, okay? And we're going to take an offering there to help offset the cost of him coming. And then he's going to be here next Tuesday night. He's going to be with us, okay? There and here. Okay, so let's pack this place out. Let's invite some people to come. And how many of you haven't heard Elliot? Let me see your hands. Because if you haven't, this guy is one of the most fascinating guys, and you're going to love him. He's still an active reservist. He's still so well informed, and he can explain things that in a way that it just makes sense. So he's going to be with us. He comes in Sunday afternoon. He'll be with us Sunday evening. Then he'll be here. So thank you for helping us spread the word on this. Really, really appreciate that. So when we come back from our break, we're going to tackle, I think, a very informative piece that's got a lot of pieces to it, but I think you'll appreciate by the time you walk out here tonight, if God will help me with getting this next piece covered, because it is absolutely enormous, okay? So let me say a prayer for us just before we snack a little bit. All right? All right. Thank you for being a God who is fully in charge, who's not nervous about what's going on in the world, but who in the midst of all of the things is working out his will. Thank you, God, for being God. Thank you for being the God who still rules and reigns from heaven. Thank you for being the God who includes so much in your word to us that we could be aware of the times in which we live. I want to thank you for each person who's streaming, for these who are here tonight. Ask, Lord, that you'll bless our time together as we converse about those things that are very dear to your heart. Use your word on us. Provoke our thought. Make a real deposit in us that will bear fruit as we have conversations with others in the days ahead. Bless our fellowship time and bring us back for a good time in your word. In your name, amen. All right. Have a good time at the tables and make the most of it. All right. You ready to get going? Let's get going. We are going to spend the rest of our time this evening on this issue that is extremely dear to God's heart. And I want you to really consider this. I think you're all aware of this term anti-Semitism. I want to talk to you about this word tonight. And one of the things that we know about anti-Semitism is that it is alive and well, and it's growing. And before I get into it, Jerry reminded me to share with you that it's National Holocaust Remembrance Day today. And we had a piece on TV on the History Channel that was talking about interviews with Holocaust survivors. And I was reminded, because of all the pictures, that just over a dozen weeks ago, I was walking through Auschwitz. I was walking through Birkenau. I was walking through Mandamek. I have a hard time believing I've actually been there. But the atrocious things, the hellish things, the things that are beyond belief that took place there, you think about that in light of what we're about to talk about tonight. And I'm telling you what, anti-Semitism back then, it has grown and continued to increase. It did not end with the end of the Holocaust. Second thing she told me is, tell everybody that John asked me if I would mention that it's his birthday today. And he told Jared, because he was afraid if he approached me directly, go direct, I probably would just poo-poo it. But because my wife asked, because he asked her, yeah. So anyway, but do you want to sing happy birthday hymn? Okay, neither do I. All right. Sing it. He loves it. He loves attention. He loves it. Well, this subject we're going to talk about has been around for way more than 2,000 years. So go back with me to Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. God is talking to Abraham. He tells Abraham, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make you the father of a great nation. And you are going to be a blessing to the nations of the world. And I'm going to bless those who bless you. I'm going to curse those who curse you. Why would God say that clear back in Genesis 12? We've hardly cracked open the Bible when God is talking about this curse that's going to come. And this curse is what we would call anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism. And so when we talk about this, it is just absolute Jew hatred. And I can tell you right now that Jew hatred is a very urgent problem. Too many people make excuses about why it's not that big a deal. I'm telling you, this is a big deal. I just shared with you, it didn't end at the end of the Holocaust. In fact, it's making such a breakthrough into the ranks of young people and the far right in political circles for the first time ever. One of the things that the Prime Minister talked about just within the last couple of weeks is the eighth front on which Israel has to fight, and that is the growing number of far-right political people that are becoming very anti-Semitic. So here's our question. What is it? What is it? It is Jew hatred. It is hostility. It is prejudice towards or discrimination against the Jews. And the person who harbors that is an anti-Semite. Don't think they're not. They'll say, well, listen, I'm not an anti-Jew person. I'm an anti-Zionist. They're one and the same. And the word is unique, anti-Semitism. It's only used in reference to the Jews. It only fits the Jews. There's not another people group in the world that applies to. Think about this. So how did we come about with the word anti-Semitism? Well, it was coined in 1879 by a German journalist by the name of Wilhelm Marr. And he used this scientific-sounding word, this term, to describe his racial hatred of Jews. And he shifts the focus from this religious bigotry to this pseudo-scientific racial concept, so it doesn't sound as offensive, anti-Semitic. A lot of people don't know what that means, so it's a safer word to use to be able to say I'm an anti-Semite. And this hostility towards the Jews existed multitude of centuries before he ever came up with the word, but he formed from this word a league of anti-Semites, and he did that to promote his own Jew hatred ideology. So he used it to falsely imply a distinct Jewish race. That's how we got the word. But it was Jew hatred before we classed it up with something that sounds a little less offensive. And time goes by, and people wonder, is it in the Bible? And the word is not found in the Bible, but the actions of anti-Semitism are. And we start to run into it and rub up against it in a variety of places. Number one, a simple answer is anywhere you find Jew hatred, that's anti-Semitism. But it really starts to make its presence in the Gospels because over time, as the church is birthed and goes on, the church becomes anti-Semitic in many ways as they blame the Jews for the death of Jesus, that the Jews killed Jesus. I ask you tonight, did the Jews kill Jesus? How do you know that? Because the Bible says, Jesus said, no one takes my life. I lay it down freely. No one takes my life. I lay it down. Jews never killed Jesus. When they hollered, let his blood be upon us, it was a group of Jews. There's a group of people protesting in Minneapolis about stuff. Do they represent all of us? Heavens, no. And yet people will throw all the Jews into that category. Well, they said, let his blood be on us. Well, that's true for the people who were there chanting, crucify him, crucify him. And listen, over in Titus, I think it's chapter 3, it talks about, and this is the way that we were. And it lists all kinds of things, all kinds of sins. But God transformed us. People will read that and they will say, well, I didn't ever do that. That doesn't represent me. What the Bible is doing is it is shining a light on the fact that, you know what? We had that in us. We never acted on it. But it was in us. We just didn't act on it. And so the reality is that mankind can be as evil as the devil. And it comes from a heart that is owned by self-centeredness and permission from the devil to have control of areas of our life. This, over time, starts to seep into the church. There's a rabbi by the name of Michael Cook who's a professor of intertestamental and early Christian literature at Hebrew Union College. And he came up with 10 themes in the New Testament that have been sources of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism. And these are very interesting. Number one, the Jews are culpable for crucifying Jesus. As such, they're guilty of deicide. In other words, they killed this deity. And again, these are 10 themes in the New Testament that smell of anti-Judaism or anti-Semitism. Secondly, the tribulations of the Jewish people throughout history constitute God's punishment of them for killing Jesus. Number three, Jesus originally came to preach only to the Jews, but when they rejected him, he abandoned them for the Gentiles instead. Number four, the children of Israel were God's original chosen people by virtue of an ancient covenant. But by rejecting Jesus, they forfeited their chosenness. And now by virtue of a new covenant or a new testament, Christians have replaced the Jews as God's chosen people, the church having become the real people of God. Number five, the Jewish Bible, meaning the Old Testament, repeatedly portrays the opaqueness and stubbornness of the Jewish people and their disloyalty to God. Number six, the Jewish Bible contains many predictions of the coming of Jesus as the Messiah or Christ, yet the Jews are blind to the meaning of their own Bible. Number seven, by the time of Jesus' ministry, Judaism had ceased to be a living faith. Think about that. Number eight, Judaism's essence is a restrictive and burdensome legalism. In other words, living under the law is a miserable existence. Number nine, Christianity emphasizes love while Judaism stands for justice and a God of wrath. Number 10, Judaism's oppressiveness reflects the disposition of Jesus' opponents called Pharisees. These are the predecessors of rabbis, who in their teachings and behavior were hypocrites. And he underscores this by Jesus, woe to you Pharisees. So what he's saying is all of these things are what he has pulled out of Christianity and Christian views and Christians' beliefs and Christians' perspective. Do you understand this? And the sad part about this is he's very right about this whole thing when it comes to certain sects of Christianity, certain people who call themselves Christians. I remember when we were at Salem before we moved here, I had preached a message on the Jewishness of Jesus, and a man came down and he was furious. And he said, are you telling me I have to go through some damn Jew in order to get to my own God? And I said to him, listen, I'm not telling you that. The Bible is telling you that. And, well, that's not the way I believe. I said, well, listen, you believe your way, I'll believe his way. I don't think you know who I am. I said, frankly, Scarlett. And you have these people who really do believe these things. So let me give you an overview here of how it kind of came into the church. Now, I want us to consider Romans 11 for a moment. So go over to Romans 11, and I want you to see this because Paul does a phenomenal job at helping steer us in the right direction when it comes to these kinds of things. And in chapter 11, he asks incredible questions. Chapter 11, verse 1, did God reject his people? And he says, by no means. And by the way, that is extremely straightforward, blatant terms in which he says this. By no means. Did God not reject his people whom he foreknew? And he goes on to talk about, no, God didn't reject them. Again, I asked, did they stumble so far as to be beyond recovery? Did they sin so bad that God has fully rejected them? And this is where he uses, strong language. Hell no. No, not at all. Rather, because of their transgression, salvation has come to the Gentiles to make Israel envious. Now look at verse 25. I don't want you to be ignorant about what I'm about to tell you, because what I'm about to tell you is a mystery. What is a mystery? Talk to me. What's a mystery? Something that hadn't been, something we can't figure out, right? We don't really know the answer. What else? What else would you say about a mystery? Yeah, who knows the answer to this, right? So listen to this. He's saying, I don't want you to be ignorant of this mystery. He's saying, now look, all the other stuff I told you, if you don't remember anything else, don't miss this, because it's going to have a direct impact on you if you do. I don't want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers, so that you may not be conceited. What's another word for conceited? Pride, arrogance, okay? You didn't want him, we got him. You're nobody, we're somebody. Do you get this? This is arrogance. He says, if you miss this, the end result of missing this, meaning that you don't understand it, or you don't agree with it, or you don't pay any attention to it, it will result in you being arrogant, prideful, conceited. And here's what the mystery is. Israel has experienced a hardening in part, meaning a blinding in part. And I guess one of the best ways I could maybe illustrate this is that person who has macular degeneration. If you know what that is, it means that you don't have vision from the center of your eye. You can only see peripheral. So you're seeing and you're looking that way while your head's turned this way because you only have peripheral vision. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you don't see it when I say, look at that. Do you see that piece of wheat in the picture? And they say, no, I can't see that. I see this all the time in my relationships with Jewish friends. I see this all the time. My first radio partner was so well-versed, so well-read, so brilliant. We would talk about some things, and he would say, I don't see that. He was never rude. He was very kind about it. He just said, I don't understand that. And why doesn't he? They've been blinded in part. They don't see at the level that God has opened up our eyes. And that's why this is so important. Israel has experienced a hardening, a blinding in part, and this is going to happen until the full number of Gentiles has come into the kingdom. And once that happens, verse 26, and so all Israel will be saved. So what he's saying here, at that point, their blinders will come off, just like it did with the Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus, who was blinded. He was struck blind. And when God told Ananias, you go pray for him, I'm not going to pray for him, he'll kill me. He was a Jew hater. He was a Christian hater. And he said, I don't want to go, I want you to go pray for him. And that's exactly what happened. And when he prayed for him, the scales fell from his eyes, and Paul saw in an amazing way. And this is what will happen. So I'm trying to help you understand that, listen, this is in the Bible, and you won't see it, but it's there. It's there. And it's really important you see this. So Jesus is born into a Jewish world, into a Jewish family. He's raised as a Jewish boy, circumcised on the 8th day, dedicated on the 40th day, keeps the laws, keeps the Sabbath, keeps all the feasts and festivals, lives as a Jewish person, spoke his message to the Jewish community from the heart, first century Israel, and yet, for a good part of 2,000 years, so many followers of Jesus, mainly in the historic Catholic Church, but not void of the Protestant movement, with some exceptions, have not only misrepresented his original teachings, but have often persecuted his own family, his own people. The church has done a phenomenal job of stripping Jesus of his Jewishness, Americanizing him, Americanizing the Bible, stripping it of its Jewishness. When we, within the first 100 years of the birth of the church, cut off the Jewish roots of Christianity, we have paid an enormous price for that, and one of the biggest evidences of that is the arrogance of the church to start doing things like this, where we totally misrepresent the teachings of Jesus himself. Modern anti-Semitism finds some of its roots in the distortion of the biblical texts, aided and eventually creating a separation of Christianity from its Jewish roots. And when the gospel goes out, and Paul is declaring the gospel to the Gentiles, these Gentiles are coming in by the droves into the kingdom. And with that comes their customs, their traditions, their ways. And when the church was birthed, it was 100% Jewish. And it still gathered on the Sabbath. It's still on the calendar. They lived by the calendar, the Jewish calendar. The holidays and holy days were very important. The church continued to practice prayers 3 times a day. And what is Peter and John doing? Going up to the Temple Mount right after the day of Pentecost. They're headed back up. What are they headed up there for? If they have Jesus, why do they need to go to the temple? They're going up there for their daily prayers. They're going up there because that's how they worshiped, and that's the exact practice that Jesus had while on earth. Now, we know that Jesus had those times where he withdrew and talked to the Father, and he talked straight from the heart. The Jews, by and large, those religious Jews, observant Jews, they don't pray except out of a prayer book. And yet at the same time, they'll have these conversations going with God. They just don't call it prayer. They call it talking with God. Well, that's what I call prayer. So, as the decades passed beyond the first century, more and more Gentiles entered this community of Jesus and following their faith, and Christianity over time began to withdraw from its Jewish roots and really become a Gentile church. And we have our church history that underscores this. By the time we get to 325, the Council of Nicaea, in other words, the major leadership of Christianity, The Council of Nicaea in 325 reflect the departure in that Jewish leadership was absent and the Jewish holiday of Passover was replaced with Easter. Messianic Jewish theologian Mark Kinsler goes on to describe the Nicene Council concern for calendar changes so that Christians would cease following the custom of the Jews. The bishops rejected any sign that the church was dependent at all on the Jewish people for its faith or its way of life. You Jews, you meet over there. We meet over here. And there was separation. And the distancing of Christianity from its Jewish roots occurred due to the destruction being strengthening the distance because of the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. So the church's birth, Jesus dies about AD 30, maybe 33. The church's birth, AD 70, destruction of the temple, and this whole thing starts to create the gospel going out, and Gentiles coming in like crazy, and it creates separation like the church has never seen. Now, the early church fathers, like Justin Martyr, who served the church from the year 100 to 165, John Chrysostom, who served the church from 347 to 407, and Augustine, who served the early church 354 to 430, looked at the New Testament texts in light of the destruction of the temple. Now think about this. They looked at the text in light of the destruction of the temple, the Jewish exile, the Roman persecution of the Jewish people in the 1st and 2nd century. These church fathers developed consistent hateful messages in their writings, and their ideas included the Jewish people's responsibility for the death of Jesus, their suffering as divine punishment for rejecting Jesus, Judaism's inferiority, and the church's replacement of Israel as God's chosen people. We call it replacement theology. The fancy word is supersessionism. But once the Roman world formally adopted Christianity as its state religion in the 4th century, these anti-Jewish teachings spread and were more formally embraced. Influenced by early church fathers, many of these church leaders throughout the centuries often set Jesus against his Jewish community by misinterpreting the New Testament text rather than seeing it through Jewish eyes and through Jewish authors as describing an internal Jewish debate about religious observance and the way to follow God. And so, with time, Christians started to impose restrictions on Jewish people, including at times on travel, where they could live, what their livelihood could be or would be allowed to be, rather than Christians displaying the very love of Christ to the community from whom Jesus came. Many Christians over time called Jewish people Christ killers, mandated conversion, and sent them to their deaths. This is our history. And the Jews know the history of Christianity better than Christians do. I promise you that. Anti-Jewish theology reached its height during the Middle Ages when the additional myths of blood libel became ingrained in Christian societies, leading to violence against the Jewish people as well as expulsion from countries like England, France, Spain, Portugal. You've heard me talk about the fact of the Spanish Inquisition, 1492, and where they pursued Christopher Columbus to go and find us a place that we can go and live and survive. Anti-Jewish writings from the church fathers inspired later Christian triumphalism like the Crusades. If you read the history of the Crusades, they were about as anti-Christian as you could get. They were killing Muslims. They were killing Jews. They raised up these Christian armies who strove to cleanse the Holy Land of infidels. Yeah. And then the 16th century, here comes Martin Luther, a Catholic priest who became frustrated with the Catholic Church because of how they treated people. He was German. He made a trip down to the Vatican to meet the Pope. Told the Pope, listen, we need to reform some of the things that the church has been doing. When he got to the Vatican, he had never been there before. He saw these people being put through all kinds of hellishness because they were assigned that if you want to find your loved one released from purgatory, you have to do these things and pay this money. And when he saw this, it drove Martin Luther through the roof. So he began to call on the Catholic Church to reform, change its ways, get their heart back to God, stop preaching all the sermons in Latin, which the people couldn't understand, and get the Bible into the language of the common people. He never intended the Reformation to take place outside the Catholic Church. He intended for that reform to happen within the Catholic Church. And once he pushed the buttons hard enough, the Pope handed down a price on Martin Luther's head, and he went into hiding. He went into hiding for 2 years. I've been to the castle where he hid and translated the Bible into the common language. And at the same time that he was doing this, God had raised up a guy by the name of Gutenberg who came up with a printing press so he could print this Bible and get it into the hands of the people. But over time, Martin Luther became anti-Semitic. He had a hatred towards the Jews because he could see the blatant rejection of Christ. Now, why would we hold the Jews to a higher standard than we would to other human beings that were Gentiles who refused and rejected Christ as much or more? And this is where God's promise to Abraham, I will curse those who curse you. And where does God draw that line? Because he pays attention to that ever since Genesis 12. The line is when you start holding the Jewish people to a higher standard than anyone else. When you judge the nation of Israel higher than you do any other nation. When you start holding Israel to that level, you're bringing a curse on yourself. And that's exactly what that means. Luther lost his patience. His last book he wrote, The Jews and Their Lies, telling people, the readers in there, listen, round the Jews up, put them in their synagogues, chain the doors, light the thing on fire, and sing the hymn, O God, we adore thee. This was the writings of Martin Luther. You've heard me tell the story here on Tuesday night before. Years go by. Someone picks up his book, says, hey, this is a pretty amazing book, decides to take one of the chapters out, use it in his own playbook, and he called that book Mein Kampf. And he was deeply, deeply, deeply impacted by Martin Luther. And he presented Martin Luther as a godly man and one that we all revered. And of course, the Lutheran Church is around back during that time. And all the people say, yes, he was a Lutheran. Yes, he was great. He was wonderful. And they didn't really even pay any attention to his history. And those who were aware of the book didn't do anything to stomp it out. So a couple of decades after the Holocaust, the institutional churches like the Catholic Church started to rethink their theology towards the Jewish people. And it wasn't until back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Catholic Church really talked about apologizing to the Jews and restructuring some of their theological positions. and tried to have internal reform. So they endeavored to foster this transition in relationship between Catholic Church and the Jewish people. So in more modern times, churches have generally moved away from the extreme rhetoric that the church fathers had in the acts of violence in the Middle Ages. Nevertheless, replacement theology still undergirds a large portion of Jewish teaching. I rub up against it constantly in my conversations with pastors. So there needs to be some correction by the church with its wrongs. This is such an important piece. It will be difficult to repair centuries of the church's teaching that has been fuel towards anti-Jewish hate. Christians need to learn this history of hatred and persecution and anti-Semitism by those who called themselves Christians. We need to know this history. We need to know this stuff that I'm telling you tonight. And we need to get serious about taking the Bible the way it is. It's a Jewish book. It's a Jewish book. We need to read it with Jewish eyes, hear it with Jewish ears, because when you do, that's the appropriate treatment of the way that God spoke his word into existence. And this happens through the reassessment of the New Testament. I'm telling you, I got none of this when I was in college studying for ministry. They owe me a refund because Israel was nothing more than a historical place in the Bible. The Jewish people played no role whatsoever. And I'm telling you, when we go back and reassess the New Testament verses that have been distorted in ways against the Jewish people for centuries, we will find out this. Now listen to me. We will accept biblical verses that speak of the Jewish people's ongoing chosenness. You'll find verses like that in the Bible. We will see the full return to God as a nation of Jews out of Zechariah, out of Romans. These kinds of things will help supersessionists with their interpretations, acknowledging that Jesus laid his own life down for the world. That combats the Jews carrying any kind of guilt whatsoever for Jesus' death. And above all, approaching Jewish people with humility is a critical step towards undoing the long history of pride that the church has carried and anti-Semitic teaching. And so I'm telling you, we have Jewish friends who will come on Tuesday night off and on, and we will never, apologize for talking about who Jesus is within the framework of our Christian belief. We're not going to apologize about that. But in humility, we will love these people at such a level that we take away from their teaching and their maybe personal experience, but certainly historical experience, that, wow, these Christian people seem to be so loving, so kind, so caring, so gracious, and rightly so, because that is a total misrepresentation by many within the framework of Christianity. So, I only have 6 minutes left. Let me tell you what the scripture says here. We have it, don't be arrogant toward the branches. Who's the branches? The Jews. They are the natural branches. Don't be arrogant toward the branches. But if you are arrogant, remember that it is not you who supports the root, but the root supports you. You ought to have that underlined. I'm telling you, this is such an important piece. So, just in the past year, we talk about this. Anti-Semitism has become so toxic and such a dangerous, lethal force in human history. And it appears right out in the open in so many different forms, so many different disguises. And it is always hatred towards the Jews. It is enemy of the Jews. And it's a threat. It's a threat to their lives. And so you have to be committed to call it out whenever and wherever you see it. And one of the ways that we have this, let me see if I have it. I'm going to talk about these real fast. We've seen social media platforms, there's no embarrassment at all about putting Jew hatred out there. So when we talk about the intensification of what's going on online, I'm telling you, the Jew hatred is out there all over the place. All over the place. From the river to the sea. They don't even know what the river is and what's the name of the sea. I always tell people, I told people on this last group that we just brought back, when you have dialogue with people who are bad-mouthing Israel and the Jewish people, listen, there's nothing wrong with being critical. Nothing wrong with being critical, as long as that criticism doesn't go over into the category of anti-Semitism, where you're actually hating these people. But you can be critical of Israel. You can be critical of the Jewish people. We're critical of our own government, are we? Some of you are. I'm not. But anyway, you can be critical. But you hear somebody starting to badmouth, just ask them, let me ask you one question. Have you ever been there? No. Then you know what? You would be best to just shut your mouth because you don't know. Because I'm telling you, these people who just came back from this tour that we were on would know exactly what I'm talking about from what they experienced there and what they hear from people here. The political phenomenon. Anti-Semitism has reached the highest levels of our political system. We have a growing number of political leaders who are as anti-Semitic as you can be, and they make no bones about it, and there's no shame about it. It's pathetic. Let me show you what's gone on here. Just past year, in the United States. Boulder, Colorado, June 1, firebombing. This man used a makeshift flamethrower to throw Molotov cocktails on a group of people who are standing in solidarity with Israeli hostages. They injured 14, one of whom later died. And the suspect told investigators he wanted to kill all the Zionist people. Do you remember this was in the news? He didn't feel bad about it at all. Washington, D.C., they shot that young couple who was coming out of the embassy of Israel to the U.S., full of life, soon to be married. These kids were shot and killed as they left an event at the Capitol Jewish Museum. The FBI investigated the incident as a possible hate crime and potential terrorism. Arson at Pennsylvania governor's residence. They set his house on fire. Do you remember this? Trump was talking about it today. He said, I reached out to the governor, Shapiro, and he said, I had a great conversation. He's a Democrat. I'm a Republican. We cared about each other. And it was specifically targeting him because he was Jewish. The campus anti-Semitism. You read on just about any campus that they had anti-Semitic events going on that you could see without having to even hardly look around for it. In Australia, the Bondi Beach attack this past December when they were going to celebrate Hanukkah. Do you remember this? Yeah, Holocaust celebration, Hanukkah celebration, and multiple people killed. The synagogue attacks by arson in both January and July in Australia. The synagogue in Melbourne was firebombed. Fire was set at East Melbourne Hebrew Congregation Synagogue. And they said that these Australian authorities that did the investigation linked some of these attacks to the Iranian government. They fueled this. Widespread vandalism and threats, January and February 25. Numerous incidents of anti-Semitic graffiti. Hitler needs to rule again. F the Jews, swastikas, property damage, targeting synagogues, child care centers, homes, and cars. Then threats to patients. 2 nurses were suspended and faced criminal charges after appearing in a social media video threatened to kill or refuse treatment to Jewish or Israeli patients. Overall, 2025 was described by some reporters as the year in which anti-Semitism became an algorithm of hate, deeply embedded in media, ecosystems, and global politics. Jewish communities worldwide felt increasingly unsafe, leading to the creation of new task forces and renewed focus on security and legislation to combat hate. Now is the time for Christians to get on the ball. It's not a time to slack. It's the most important time to stand up with Israel for Israel. Why? Because that's God's position. That's God's heart. And we stand with God when it comes to Israel. Right? Well, you should say so. We stand with God when it comes to that. I believe that the promise that God made to Abraham is just as strong now as it ever was in the moment that he spoke that to Abraham. He made that promise to Abraham, and he's a God who keeps his promises. So I've run us out of time, but I think this is such an important piece for us to have a chance to look at, this subject of anti-Semitism. It's far bigger than this, but I hope you got your appetite whet just a little bit, and you'll do a little bit of homework on this. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Let me say a prayer over you. Jesus, help us with this issue of anti-Semitism as we rub up against it, as we see it. Give us the wisdom to know how to respond. Give us the words that we need to speak, but help us to be able to recognize it so that we could make some noise about it. Thank you for these who have taken the time to be here tonight. Keep us tethered to your great heart. And, oh, Lord, we pray for Israel tonight. We pray for our Jewish friends tonight. We ask, oh God, you keep your hand upon them and fulfill all that you have planned for them, the role that they have to play in the end times. And that between now and then, oh God, you will reveal yourself to them like only you can. Drop the scales from their eyes, and may they look upon the one whom was pierced for them and for us. We ask this tonight, Jesus, in your name. Amen. All right. Thanks for being here tonight. Yeah. No, Elliot will talk on 2 different things. One thing Sunday night, a different item when he comes here on Tuesday night. Thanks, you guys, for being here tonight. Have a good rest of the evening.